Hi. Today we're calling this Crisis of Faith, Fundamentalism versus Relativism. And there's probably a better title than that, which might show up in the title. The reason that we're making this, Joanna's here with me again.
Hello.
She keeps me on the straight and narrow, or at least, a little bit more efficient with my thoughts. The reason we're doing this is because there was a guy, it was a sad story actually. He had his website up, I think it was called Theology Blogging or something like that. And he described an experience he had, which was an inspired moment where he came to Jesus. That's the way to say it, I think. And because he had an inspired moment and he plowed into Christianity, Scripture, and it was in an evangelical context, he studied and went deeper and deeper and deeper, and he found out more and more stuff, which among the things that he found was that according to academics, biblical scholars, the voice of Jesus in the Gospel of John is not Jesus, that Jesus didn't say any of that stuff. And in fact, I've heard the Gospel of John called the Gnostic Gospel by some people. Now, the other thing that he had happen that shook his faith, apparently, was that Jesus, and then Paul famously, made a lot of claims that the end times are near, that heaven is coming, and all these kinds of things. Well, Jesus was wrong. Paul was way wrong. Everybody was wrong. So between these two things, he basically, it shook his faith badly enough to where he went and tried to go find something that would return him to a solid sense. Now, he had his religious experiences in the evangelical context with Jesus, with his relationship with Jesus. And yet, the more he found out about the inspired Word of God, I'm putting quotes, air quotes on the inspired Word of God, meaning the Bible, the more he found out about in biblical scholarship, the shakier his faith became. So he has an experience, it was shaken by what he learned. Let's remember that. Another thing that's come up, and it's recently nearby, there's a basically, I don't know what to call it, a Romanesque basilica. It's a $40 million church, SSPX, which I'm not really even sure what that stands for. Do you know what that means? Society of St. Pius X.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
it.
Society of St. Pius X. I actually told my pastor about this, and I said, over at the Catholic Church, this is all a Catholic phenomenon. And SSPX is a trad cat thing. This is all, I'm new to this stuff. I'm not completely,
The
steeped in
church
it.
is called Immaculata.
Yeah, the church is called Immaculata, And I told my pastor about this down the street, and he goes, it's very sad. And I thought it was a funny response to hear a priest say it's very sad when you've got a $40 million basilica that seats 1,500 people, and it's packed to the gills with 3 or 4 masses every Sunday or something like that, and that people came from around the world to go to the dedication or ribbon cutting ceremony. People came from everywhere to do this, and there's a lot, it's an amazing phenomenon. In the middle of, it's in St. Mary's, Kansas, which has a population of like 3,500 people. I've been in many Catholic churches, here and there throughout the years, especially since the 70s. And you've got major cities, major population centers. You got this tired out, bored, worn out group of maybe 100 or 200 people in there, max, if you can get them. Sometimes hardly anybody at all. There's such a lack of interest. So it's interesting to me that the priest here locally, who is not an SSPX priest, actually felt that it was a sad thing, and I recognize there are a lot of Catholics who believe that, let's say, Pope Francis is the main guy, and that the problem is around the Pope's legitimacy and things like that. So those are things that happen.
And these are traditional Latin masses.
Yeah, all these are traditional Latin masses. There's a church down the street, and Joanna had some lady that went there said, "Oh, you've got to come. It's like going to heaven on earth, you know. And well, I have not been to these. And like I said, I've been in Latin masses up until the age of whatever, 7 or 8, or whenever they quit having them. Back in Belleville, after the Second Vatican Council, they stopped. Well, okay, so this is why I'm doing this. This is the setup for it. And I'm even trying to really understand why I'm animated about it. Joanna and I were talking about this, and it seems to her that, and correct me if and where I'm wrong, that it has to do with the crisis of faith, about how it is that a person can lose what they found. You know, so, you know, a moment of inspiration is a hard fought moment. You know, I mean, in other words, you go through a certain life of whether it's a boring job or boring tasks or sense of mediocrity, and then, you know, a little light goes off in your head and you go, oh, you know, the vision comes through. It's the proverbial light piercing through the stained glass window, and you have an inspired moment. I've definitely had inspired moments, had many inspired moments. And to have an inspired moment like that, to, let's say, be found in the context of a certain thing, let's say in the context of evangelical religion, or in the context of the Bible, or, you know, you have these moments, and then to lose it. And in fact, what's sadder still is to lose it because of the fire, that it lit a fire under your butt, and you get into it and you get into the information, you find out more and more, and the more you find out, the worse it gets, and you end up losing your inspired moment. You lose your inspired moment. I'm really concerned about this in a lot of ways close to home. Not so much myself, because I'm fairly jaded, to be honest with you, true confessions. I'm kind of jaded about these things, as is Joanna. We've had our so-called inspired moments, we've had our New Age thing, and we've had our Catholic thing, and we've had all kinds of things. And you start to realize that, you know, I'm going to put it succinctly like this. There's an analogy, there's a metaphor of a pillow which has a pillowcase and feathers. Okay, if you just have a pillowcase, and that, now, to, you know, spoiler alert, the pillowcase represents a form of fundamentalism. The pillowcase represents rules. It represents guidelines. It represents the basics. The feathers inside the pillow represent the spirit, the reason for those, for the container. The pillow is really mostly feathers, and the pillowcase keeps those feathers in one place so that they can have some effect. You know, you do that with a fire ring as well, in terms of the, you know, I'm talking about an inspired moment. A fire ring has to be fairly tight. If the fire is sprawling out too much, it takes too much fuel to keep the fire hot and burning. So you have a tight sort of a fire ring, you have a clear area, but the fire needs to be sort of tight, you know, sort of in a way, the tighter it is, in other words, the more constricted it is, the hotter your possibility of having a good and sustained fire. You see, the first way you put out a fire is to scatter the ashes. That's the first way you deal with it. You get rid of it, you scatter the ashes. So the situation here is I'm feeling my way on this, because I think it's a really, really critical point. And maybe I think the reason the reason I'm having a struggle understanding exactly how to put this is that it is so ubiquitous. It is so ever present in all areas of our whole experience. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say that the scientific method itself, which is what we're steeped in, is seriously putting the cart before the horse. We decided back in, what was it, the 1700s with Descartes, or before that, was it the 1500s? We decided to put the scientific method ahead of religion. Okay, in other words, the science was the real deal, and then religion gets a chance to play in that edge, in that border. I think it's wrong. It's a reversal of the way it really should be. Obviously, that you can make arguments for saying that science should be the fence, and religion should be able to play inside of that fence. I'm going to say that with Newton, and Newton felt this way for sure, and it's arguably even Einstein felt this way, that the fence around us is religion. The fence is what you determine to be your spiritual reality. Your spiritual reality is that fence, and within it you can play and you can do your things on the inside. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe should be fundamental about our spiritual beliefs and relativistic about what happens inside of. I had an experience along these lines. It may sound very, very different, but along these lines, I was actually I was leading this RCIA class way back in the 80s. And somebody smuggled a copy of the Baltimore Catechism into the RCIA class. And I never saw a room erupt with enthusiasm and hunger as when they got a hold of the Baltimore Catechism, which basically shows what the soul looks like when it's corrupted by sin. And it gives you very clear guidelines. Well, the Baltimore Catechism among the clergy, the pastor of the parish at the time, back in whatever it was, 85, they feel that this is heinous. I mean, it's a real regressive and primitivistic, overly literalistic interpretation of spiritual life. And yet it remains that people have this hunger for guidelines, for guardrails. And this SSPX Basilica in St. Mary's is a clear demonstration. You've got people coming from around the world. They're happy, they're exuberant, they're so happy to be there because this place promises to say, this is what we believe. This is how we believe it. You're free to have your children here. You can have your picnics here. You can have your education here. You go to Mass here. But this is what we believe. It's very, very clear. We're not going to rock your boat with ideas that are outside of an orthodoxy. We're going to serve you up an orthodoxy because it is the revealed way of God instituted by Jesus Christ on this earth. And so that's why people say, yes, I can go with this. It's kind of like the grown-up or current-day version of what I would say was my Baltimore Catechism moment. And then back to this guy that lost his evangelical Jesus, and he actually became a Muslim. He lost it because of his fire ring, his pillowcase, his edge was broken. It was violated. Jesus said, new wine goes in new wineskins. If you have an old wineskin, the new wine will burst the wineskin. There's again another metaphor analogy here between the wineskin being structure and what goes into it is the spirit. And you have to realize, I'm going to say this as a bottom line, whatever your experience is, wherever you're at, the wine is superior to the wineskin. We got to think about that. The wine is superior to the wineskin. The feathers are superior to the pillowcase. The feathers are superior to the pillowcase. And in a sense, the fire is superior to the fire ring. So the fire ring is determined by the fire you want to build. The pillowcase determines the kind of pillow experience you want. And what was the other analogy I used? Fires, pillows, and wineskins. The wineskin, the new skin for a new wine. Okay? The new skin for a new wine. So in any situation that you've got, where you've got a sense of an upwelling of your spiritual sense, now, as soon as you have a spiritual sense, and this is true of this guy that had his experience, as soon as you put words and labels on it, as soon as you have your experience, you put words and labels on it, that constitutes an edge, that constitutes a boundary. You might choose poor wording. You might choose bad concepts. Let's say you want a certain pillow experience. Okay, just use that as an experience. And you make it too tight. You make it too hard. Well, and you put your head on, you go, there's no pillow here at all. So you accuse the feathers and you have a problem. And so you go off and you get a new pillow or something like this. The problem with this is it was your pillowcase. Your relativistic thoughts, in other words, relativism, context, flexibility, mobility, has to be in the realm of that inferior, the inferior being the container for the experience. In the case of the SSPX Church, and this is where I have trouble, people sometimes, especially I'd say in a Western context, because of our predisposition to view hard reality as superior to spiritual soft reality. Hard reality, the shape of things, the measurable is superior to the immeasurable. The immeasurable is made up. It's imaginary. And realizing that, your imagination and the spirit of something takes you where you go. It's not the measurable part of you that takes you anywhere. So that when you come into a situation like this evangelical guy, and suddenly he's had his enlightened experience, and now he starts measuring that pillowcase. He starts measuring and testing it and going, well, this is lousy. And so he throws the whole thing out. He throws his whole religion out. That throughout his Jesus moment, it throughout the context of how he was, found God or the Lord or whatever it is, and it sort of crashed and burned. So say something. What do you do?
So the whole idea that this gentleman had that experience, and now Jesus is relativized as just a prophet. He's no longer the Messiah, the Son of God. He's relativized in that manner.
Yes. Okay. Let me take that. He is relativized Jesus. Okay. In this, now Jesus becomes a prophet. Jesus. The experience of Jesus fits better into this more fundamental Muslim context because he is a prophet among prophets. It diffuses Jesus as, let's say, the holy one and only Son of God that provides a spiritual experience, because he goes into it and realizes, well, Jesus didn't really say that great stuff that in John. That's some other character. I don't know who that person is. And so I think that in this situation we're in, where Jesus is relativized, somehow we have to cling to the spiritual nature of our inner experience, knowing that God, if I can be so presumptuous to say it, God is going to speak through a spiritual experience. God is not going to speak through a physical experience. I mean, we have Jesus walking on water. That's like saying, boom, forget the idea that the physics of surface tension of anything is going to make anything happen. Now, so you say, well, if I were there, Jesus wouldn't have really walked on water. Do you not understand? Well, actually, maybe you do understand. Let me say, Phil, do you understand? Is that this Jesus walking on water, or Peter falling into the water because of a lack of faith, and all this whole scene of, what is it? A struggle between science and spirituality, science and spirit. Jesus is saying, I am the superior. I am the, like this. Peter, you can walk on water. Do you get that? You can walk on water. You go out and try it. You can't walk on water. That's the point. And Jesus is saying, in me, you can walk on water. So if we say, well, I think that they're making that stuff up. That's a famous argument, right? Who are you going to find? Show me someone who can walk on water. This is the point, and this is the whole point. And it gets maybe into Plato's ideal forms. I've wanted to drag Plato into this. Plato believes there are ideal forms. Ideal forms. The ideal form in some heaven, some other realm of ideals, is superior to any object on earth. Okay? So let's take Jesus walking on water. I don't care who did or did not walk on water. I don't care what evangelist wrote or made up or saw or had an inner experience or misinterpreted or hyperinflated Jesus's miracles. The point is, for us as Westerners, Jesus in that context represents the superior. And the Jesus on earth is the inferior.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The Jesus that walks on water is the superior. I don't care if he did it or not, okay? I don't care if he spoke in John or not. If John speaks to me, that's closer to the superior, to the ideal form. This is Platonic, and we have to go with this because science can and will disprove every single aspect of the spiritual experience. And so then we'd say, okay, well, maybe we're not really spiritual beings. This is a game that we play because when you see things happen in the world, when you see, we'll say, the rain fall and then this rainbow comes out and all this. But what are you supposed to do? Check your pulse and say, well, you're having another delusional experience. You're feeling good because you saw a rainbow. It's nothing but some sort of frequencies of color and diffracted light. So you just say that to yourself. And instead, you say, no, this is the inferior. The rainbow is the inferior because I'm having an experience that's the superior. It doesn't matter. In other words, the rainbow isn't the experience. The rainbow is not the experience.
Right.
My experience is a shadow of a reality that is more important, which is the inspired sense of purpose and meaning. So we have to, I guess, in a way, cling to an understanding of purpose and meaning. But then the storm comes. The storm comes, which is your ideas are wrong. You're betrayed. I'm betrayed by Jesus. I'm betrayed by the Gospels. I'm betrayed by the Pope. I'm betrayed by the church. I'm betrayed by these things.
And academia does it a lot.
Oh,
it takes it down a lot. Academia.
Yeah. Well, the whole the academic experience is, there's this sort of highbrow, condescending. Well, you had your very interesting experience there. Okay, well, it's world wrestling. I'm going to drag world wrestling into it. If you've got, who's that humongous guy? Hulk Hogan. You've got, let's say, and these guys are like breaking tables over each other's heads and all this. It's not unlike sumo wrestling in Japan. The sumo wrestler is really just a big fat guy. And he's a baby. He's a big, huge baby. But he's modeled as a titan in a superior realm, in a divine realm. And there are these two titans fighting each other. And that the ring that they're in is like, it's not on the earth. It's in heaven somewhere. It's in some elevated place where titans face off and throw each other around. We often live here. It's extremely, extremely important to hang on to the beauty and the reality of those experiences, so that if the world wrestling people, you say, come on, Jerry Lawler can't do that, Hulk Hogan can't. Look, if you broke a table over the guy's head, he'd have a concussion. Or if you threw him out of the ring into the stands, whatever it is, suffice to say, those guys are strong enough and big enough and muscular enough to believe that they're doing something, air quote, real. Okay? But what's really real about world wrestling or sumo or Jesus? Okay? What's the really real? It's in the ideal realm. It's in the realm of ideal forms. I have to go back to this. I got a feeling I'm going to have to do another bit on this because I don't feel like I'm drilling to that actual point, and we're almost there. So to wrap up, I think the pillowcase is inferior to the feathers. Okay? Now, if you put your head on a bunch of feathers, you got nothing. You got a mouthful of feathers. You can't sleep on a pile of feathers. Yet, if you take the pillowcase and you sleep on that, you ain't got nothing. You're just sleeping on a piece of rag, whatever. So you see, the pillow exists. Very Zen koan kind of a thing here. Where's the pillow? Is it in the pillowcase? Is it in the feathers? Oh, it's an idea. It's an idea of resting your head on something. I'm going to say that Jesus is that pillow, okay? The sumo wrestlers is that thing. You're resting that there's a larger world where these things work themselves out. The world wrestling is a desperate attempt among people to feel the magic of this kind of realm where things work themselves out. And it's not all slide rules and calculators. It's a magical realm, the superhero phenomenon. So we have to okay, maybe that would be a good title for this. Jesus is a superhero. And he shouldn't have to prove himself anywhere outside of the comic book image that he might be to anyone, anywhere. And I would say that that's true of my own inspired life, okay? The inspirations I have, your spiritual experience. Yes. You have a spiritual...
And don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Do not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Do not throw it out. I mean, it's too easy in this day and age for someone to come along and say, it's not relevant. It's not really that. You probably made it all up or whatever,
There is a point that has to be... We're in a situation now where language itself has been degraded. Language, I think it's safe to say, language hasn't been elevated, it's been degraded in terms of, what is it, somebody on Facebook, there are 75 different genders, or, orange is the new black, or black is the new green, or whatever, however we've worked our mindscape, or in the case of, let's say, action movies where you've got a woman who's she weighs 115 pounds and she beats up a guy that weighs 275 pounds and he's 6'8". Now you could say, well, and there's an ideal world where this woman exists who can beat up this guy, or no. And this is a problem we have, that in Plato's ideal forms, you have to go into what is the ideal form of woman, what is the ideal form of man. Absolutely, I know that there are cultural constructs in this. I understand social constructs that they want to bust open, that women shouldn't be limited because, hey, maybe a 115-pound woman can beat up a guy that's the size of Wilt Chamberlain. But that's not really the case. I mean, and even in an ideal world, I don't know that that's the case. And in an ideal world, it's understanding the relationship between a male and a female. This is a part. It's not, in other words, relativism attacks the container. And there has to be some respect for okay, I said that the container is inferior. I said that the container is inferior to the content. The pillowcase is inferior to the feathers. That having been said, one has to understand what that container is. Any old fire ring, a fire ring can be too small. It can be too big. But wherever it is, there's a sweet spot for the fire ring. It can't be whatever you want it to be. It has to be somewhere. And our definitions, our understanding of words, what is male, what is female, there has to be an understanding of these things. And our understanding of it has to be really a sort of a sacred process. In other words, the content of the inside of the pillow, in a way, the feathers, if you gave them a voice, they have to say, what is the ideal pillowcase? The feathers are telling you what the ideal pillowcase is. And that would be what we call natural law or something like that. There's got to be a sense to where there's a hunger for this Latin Mass and the SSPX, and the growth of this is because within the Catholic Church, the Church, starting with Vatican Council, but now definitely with Pope Francis, there's been a removing the guardrails. And people want to rebuild guardrails. They want those guardrails rebuilt. And the Pope is not a guardrail. If the guardrail that you have, which is a belief in the infallibility of the Pope, if that guardrail is rubber or flexible or goes all over the place, or it's like, hey, I'm a guardrail that's no guardrail at all. How about that? I'm that kind of guardrail. It's like going to the Grand Canyon and going, you know what? They make guardrails so that you bump into them, you can see them. They're not going to make a glass guardrail so that you have a better view of the Grand Canyon. You get that by going up to it and holding onto a nice steel post so that you don't fall 300 feet over the edge. That's the point of guardrails. They have a psychological component and they have a very, very real component. Yes, a glass guardrail might work at the Grand Canyon, but it could be very disturbing, which would create more harm than good to have a glass guardrail, even though it seems to be in the spirit of seeing more of the Grand Canyon. So there's a study of this, and I'd say, I don't know how else to say it, is that we're very confused about it, and there's a scrambling to recreate form. People are saying that the Christian nationalism or a certain kind of conservatism and all these are all, they are as much as they are values in themselves, as much as they are that, they are reactions to the removal of guardrails.
I agree. And the definition of a woman, when she becomes such a major superhero and everything else, the guardrails are so far off from how God made woman that she doesn't really have the option to be just a woman anymore. She doesn't have that option.
Okay, well, and that nails it right there. And I don't know where else you go from there. You have a choice. Who's making this? Am I the creator? Am I, Phil Hamilton, I am the creator. I am the creator of my reality. Nice New Age thought, but it doesn't work that way. When the lawyer sends me the letter, when the IRS is after me, when my knees give out because they've been overworked or whatever it is that happens, I meet the wall. And I'm not determining what that wall is. It happens to me. So the idea that I'm creating my own reality in that sense is delusional.
Right, it is. Yeah.
And so that's what you're saying. What God intended is a placeholder for, there are walls out there that I have no say-so over. And I best understand how consciousness works, how meaning and purpose and motivation, how these things actually work to make not just anything, not like a lab rat with whatever green hair. It's actually to find out to make a whole human being, something that can be productive. Productive. What is productive? You got to eat. You have to live somewhere. Productive means the shell is maintained somehow. What's your skill set? So those are whole other huge topics. But I'm going to say that the whole reason that this is happening is because we are in a relativized society that is basically saying, hey, we can replace God. That's, the Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. Hey, God, step aside. We got this thing figured out. And it's not working out for us. And the decision to continue going with that really, really is, what is it, the last line of wherever that was, the devil's line? I would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven, or something like that. So, and if that's a choice a person's making, they're making the demonic choice. I would rather be the king of the world I create than being a servant in a world created by God. Something like that.
Exactly it, yeah.
Quick summary, there's a church with thousands and thousands and thousands of excited and animated people at an SSPX church in St. Mary's, Kansas. And how can the Catholics be sad? How do you keep that together? How do you gather this? And it's indicating a very powerful need, hunger for this form. And how can we have an understanding of that form so it doesn't break on us and leave us sad and purposeless and disoriented? Thank you very much. I think that's it. Was that good?
I think that's good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Joanna, for your smiling face and helping me stay on track. Talk to you guys later. Bye.